Welcome to the podcast series Unshakable Strength Empowering Black Women, sponsored by the Empower Project. The Empower Project is a partnership between Howard University and Health HIV, sponsored by the PACE grant from Gilead Sciences. Girlfriend's podcast miniseries, Unshakable Strength Empowering Black Women, is dedicated to addressing the unique health challenges faced by Black women and girls, particularly in the context of HIV prevention. We will explore important topics such as sexual health, mental well being, access to healthcare, and strategies for HIV prevention tailored to the needs of Black women and girls. We invite you to listen to our other episodes that we explore important topics like trauma and health disparities, stigma and cultural understanding for mental wellness, nurturing healthy relationships, and already available for you. Today's episode, Growing Strong, Early HIV Interventions for Young Girls, will delve into the challenges and successes of addressing HIV prevention and treatment in this vulnerable population. Tune in to Growing Strong and join the conversation on how we can support the health and well-being of young girls worldwide. For today's episode, we have an amazing guest speaker, Tiffany Bacon, who has a 20-plus year career in public health. She is the co-author of We Get to Choose, an innovative sexual and mental health program for Black teens. Welcome, Tiffany, and thank you for joining us. Is there
Hi.
anything you would like to say to our viewers before we get into our engaging conversation?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I am looking forward to our conversation today. But I am also the creative and production director at the only Black talk radio station in Pennsylvania, WURD. So I am very happy to be a part of that team as well.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And congratulations. I know that is amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so we're gonna hop into our conversation. So the first question that I'm going to ask is a easy, subtle question to get us into the nitty-gritty. So how and with whom are young girls learning about sex, reproductive health, and how to communicate their feelings about both?
Oh, man. Well, we are in a digital world. So your first line of defense, your first place to learn information is at home. But different parents don't always share that information. They don't feel that it's good to talk about it sometimes, whether it's because of their religious background and it's just taboo, and the messaging is just don't have sex, the end. But there are dangers in that, because if you're out in the world at all, you're going to encounter messages, whether it's through music, whether it's through friends, from school, walking down the street. It's around you all the time. So what your home life is like will often dictate how you get information and how you process the information you get. Are you afraid to learn it? Some young ladies don't feel empowered to ask questions because it's not talked about, or they see adverse responses when it's brought up at home. But on the flip side, when they're with their friends, you might hear a whole lot of stuff that you're like, whoa, this is this is a lot. You're talking about a lot. And they may not be able to process that either. So yeah, it's the world around them. And you can only shelter a child with so much. There's a lot to process. And social media makes things even easier to have access to.
I agree. And I think, each generation is different. So how, the older generations may approach having those types of conversations is much different from how the younger generations address those conversations. And like you said, the younger generations definitely use social media to get a lot of their information. And a lot of the times it's a misinformation, right? And it could be limited or stigmatized. And unfortunately, stigmatized information is not the right information because it's stemming from, other people's personal experience or other people's cultural beliefs. And every culture is not the same. Every environment is not the same. Every home is not the same. Every family isn't the same. Some people come from a two-parent household where others come from a one-parent household, or they may not even have access to their parents for, various reasons.
Right.
Um, and then depending on all of those factors, sometimes the conversations can be avoided. So people don't learn about it until, they get out into the world, and then the world is like, hey, here I am. Here's all this information. And you're like, I have no idea what it is that
Yeah.
this information even is. So I definitely agree wholeheartedly with everything that you stated.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's conflicting information sometimes because
yes,
things you
for
might,
sure.
if you believe what your parents say, not all parents have the right information either. And so there's that, which is, if you're talking about just basic biology, I used to facilitate programs for many, many years. And we had like an adult companion program where we were teaching the parents of the students that we had in our workshops the same information so that everybody was on the same page when having discussions at home. And you would be amazed at how many adults didn't even know how their body worked, how their reproductive organs function, um, just the basic stuff. And so information would be shared with the child that would be incorrect because they don't even have the basic knowledge of what's going on with your body. So it's really important for everyone to really understand what's going on in here. You live in this thing every day. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And in what ways do you think that trauma, depression, and societal pressures, government policies, and even, how we discuss the home environment can influence a young girl's decision about their sexual health and well-being?
Yeah, that's a great question because in general there are so many factors that go into a person's decision. Um, if some say, for example, if a young person has had an experience that they've not shared with their family, whether it was an experience of abuse or near abuse, um, and they feel either ashamed or afraid to speak up about it, how they hear other people talk will then inform not only if they talk about it, but then what they do next. Do they feel ashamed of having any conversations about sex? Are they more intrigued? Do they want to find out more, and maybe use sex as a way of coping with the situation that has happened? We see what's happening now with abortion laws, and there's some places where just to even talk about sex at all is like a horrible offense. You're looked at criminally by some people. So then if you figure like, okay, I don't know what I'm gonna do if I do get pregnant, so I'm just not gonna have sex at all. I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm not gonna share anything, and you may have questions. So whenever it does happen, you may not have the answers, and you can put yourself in a bad situation because it's a lot you don't know because you don't feel confident in asking. On another leg of that thought, you may just say, hey, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. You only live once, YOLO and all that. So I'm just going to do any and everything because whatever, it doesn't matter. All these things can influence somebody if they don't have any grounding, if they don't have any foundation, if they don't have a good support system at home where they feel like I have someone I can talk to and get real answers without being punished for asking the question, could really set a young person on a negative path for just experimenting and finding out kind of too late when they have encountered an infection, when they've encountered maybe even manipulation and they don't know that they're being manipulated. Um, there's so many things that can happen, but there's also the idea that sex in general is just bad. And so how does that inform her as she grows up and tries to start a relationship? How does she see it? How does she feel about it? So yeah, all of these things really inform a young woman, but the basics are, what is your grounding? Where can you go to get good information, honest information? Where can you share your thoughts without being made to feel like you're awful?
And you said a lot, and what caught my attention was like the categories it kind of like could fall under. Like you started with, the societal stigmas around Black women's sexuality, and then you went into the restrictive policies, the limit to, comprehensive sex education, that ties into like the education realm, and then healthcare, and then, to end it off like those safe spaces where they say, oh, don't have sex, or the person makes that individual decision that they're not going to. So another question to throw at you, like on average, do you think that girls or people, Black women, period, have a trusted adult that they can speak with about sexual,
Mm.
reproductive, and emotional health? Because if they don't, how would they navigate this space that is normal for a lot of other people that may not typically be normal for them?
It's hard to answer that in general terms because, first you got to think about age group, um, then religious group, um, and then you got to think about what does it mean to have a trusted person to talk to? You know what I mean? So, like, how do we categorize that trusted person, i.e., someone who knows their stuff and can speak to you in an unbiased way? They're not throwing in all their relationship drama into their conversation with you. Like there's wisdom in some experiences, but there's also projection that happens sometimes. If a person is not healed or even understands their own experience, they can project their experience onto the other person, tainting that information. So the person who can come to you, so for example, say there's two girlfriends, one's a little older, one's a little younger. The older one has had, kind of been knocked around by relationships, had some bad situations, had some bad deals. The younger one comes and asks a question about, say, what does it mean if my partner wants me to fill in the blank, some sexual activity. And the older person goes off on a tangent about, oh, well, all these fill in the blank, all these men, all these women, all these whatever, they ain't nothing because that's not really informing them because there's a generalization that's used. So you got to say, like, where's the first place a person should go to get that information? You got to self assess. Is my family or are my family members open? Will they allow me to come and ask these questions and I not, get in trouble? I not get looked at like, well, what you doing? What you want to know? You asking me because what are you doing? There's that. So
I
I don't know.
Yeah, I've experienced that, but I don't want to. We're not going to get into it. But
I
I
mean, you
love
can
hearing.
share.
Yeah, I love
You know what that feels like.
it. Does, and I come so like I kind of I always say I had the best of both worlds because my mom is a millennial and my grandmother is a baby boomer, but like where they were before I got here is not where we are now that I am here. So like before I come from a religious background, so we always like everybody in our family grew up in church, but like my grandmother was in church, but then she was also outside, and my mom was just outside, so like growing
Okay.
up, I was always telling my friends, like, I got the best of both worlds. Like, I can go with my mom to have fun and do whatever it is that I want, to a limit because my mama didn't play. But then, like, with my grandmother, it was like absolutely not. It was like strictly holiness. And, it was a different type of conversation with the both of them. And, as I got older, like my grandmother was like, well, if you decide to start, having these sexual interactions, like, would you tell me? And I was like, how would I even have that conversation? Like I had to ask her that, and it's crazy because she couldn't even give me an answer on how I would tell her, that I had these.
Mm,
So it was kind of like, how are you asking me, if I'm going to tell you if I start, but you don't know how you want me to bring it up. Is it
right.
really the conversation you want to have, or is it just, you want to be in my business because it's not giving, that trusted relationship environment where I could just, come and tell you and it be more of like a transparency conversation rather honest conversation where like you're asking me. So that was an interesting point that you made because I was like, you can't answer that question, generally because there's a lot of factors that tie
Mhm.
into that. So, thank you for that. Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
that. Thank you for that. Another question that I have is, in what ways can empowering young girls through education and advocacy lead to better health outcomes in
Mhm.
relation to HIV specifically?
Yeah, I mean, knowledge is power, period. Knowledge is power. Understanding what HIV is the first thing because we are 40 plus years beyond the first diagnosis, right? And there's still a lot of people that don't know what HIV is, that there's a difference between HIV and AIDS. You can have HIV and never get AIDS, but no one with AIDS is absolved of HIV. Like everyone with AIDS has HIV. So just the simple basics. You got to let the young folks know what these things are, how you acquire them. This is not a go sit on a toilet seat, bam, you have AIDS now. You kiss somebody, oh my God, you have AIDS. Like there's still some stigma that needs to be brought, that needs to be dealt with. Some people still believe some of the ugly things that were said in the 80s and 90s about folks who are living with HIV and or AIDS. So having the knowledge of what it is important. Having the knowledge of how you get any STI is important because if you make the decision to engage in sexual activity, you need to know protection is important. This is what protection looks like. Here are your options. Understanding that there's skin to skin contact situations where you're like, okay, I'm not going to do this, I'll do that, but you're still at risk for some things. It's empowering for young ladies to know this so they also can build the muscle of communicating their feelings
Mhm.
to their partner. You might not be able to tell your grandma, you might not be able to tell your mom, but if you can't talk to your partner, you really don't need to even be involved with that person on that level because what is that? You can't have a conversation, a real, honest conversation about what y'all even doing. So building the muscle of speaking up, asking questions, taking a look at what's going on down there before you leap.
Mhm.
That don't look right. Let me ask you a question about this. If they get offended, if they get defensive,
Mhm.
you need to be able to say, no, we're not doing anything till we talk about this right here. No, really, how many people you've been with? How many people are you dealing with right now? Make these decisions. Far too often, more young ladies than not that I have heard, will feel mousy about asking their partner these questions. They'll feel like, oh, well, they won't like me anymore, or they're not going to want to deal with me, or they're going to, some other negative thing that they can come up with. And it's like, but is being with this person that important if you can't bring it up?
Okay. I get that. I get that. And when you said knowledge is power, because I came from a religious background, I always would tell a lot of younger people, in the church or just who was religious, be careful of those who, when you seek in wisdom or you seek in, understanding or knowledge, be careful of people who have a word and not who have the word. And I thought about it, and when you said knowledge is power, like I feel like that applies to just life period because people can always give you good nuggets or people like it could because if they have the language or the vernacular to make it sound good, it
Mm-hmm.
could be a lie, but it could sound so good that when you
Yep.
hear if it's the first time that you hear it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the truth. And then when you go get the education or you go seeking and you just want to, validate what it is that they're saying, like fact check it, you find out it's not the truth. So everybody who's listening and watching, remember, Tiffany Bacon said, knowledge is power. So go educate yourself because education is a real thing. And, common sense is not that common. So knowledge is power.
Ma'am, it is not.
It's not. It's not. It's not. It's not. It's not. But yes, knowledge is power. So how do you think technology and social media can be leveraged to spread awareness and provide support for young girls regarding HIV prevention and treatment?
I love this question because, social media gets a negative eye from so many folks, especially I'm Gen X, so Gen X and up, millennials too. Some millennials, Gen X and up, give a strong side eye to social media for so many reasons. It's like all the time. But I look at it the way I look at it like look at television in the early days. If you know anything about how Sesame Street started, Sesame Street was put together by educators and people who wanted to see better education, especially for inner city kids. That means Black kids, brown kids, inner city kids. And they took this medium at the time that was like commercial driven, full entertainment and some news, right? We're talking late 1960s. And they said, we can actually use this to educate the babies on how to learn their letters, how to learn numbers, how to learn how to count, social skills, things of that nature. And these educators saw television as a medium for education. Same thing with social media. You just got to put the right things together in a way that connects with the person or people you're trying to reach. TikTok is phenomenal. People are doing all types of challenges. Well, get a couple of ideas together, and what can you do to put a challenge together for this bit of knowledge? You know, there are no limits to the way, creative ways you can use social media as a tool for education. I don't think it's been, tapped into to the biggest degree yet. But it's there and it's waiting for someone to really take hold and say, hey, you know what? We can spread the message in this way. And next thing you know, folks have the information. So I think people just need to say, look, this is an option. Let's use it for good.
So through technology and social media, what innovative approaches do you think could be implemented to enhance HIV prevention and treatment, especially for young girls moving forward, especially with representation? I know representation is a big thing. We want to see people that look like us and not, necessarily stock photos of just a group of Black women who we know don't relate to us. So,
Right.
so
Right.
what innovative approaches do you think could be implemented?
Yeah, actually, where I used to work, we had a variety of programs that we did, including creating We Get to Choose. We created that program to not just speak to sexual and reproductive health knowledge and information, but to also address the mental health part of it. So a lot of programs will not have that part in there, but you got to talk about, how are you feeling about you? Have you even understood yourself yet before you make these decisions? Spend some time with you. Be clear about who you are. We had a program called The Hype. It was a TV show that we created. It was a TV talk show that was created by, for, and about young women. So you have these clear, like college age, super fly sisters. It was not my old crusty self on there talking about. I was the director, well, not the video director, but like the organizer of it. But I understand, we understood that young folks hear it better from other young folks. So you have these young ladies, college age or just beyond college age, talking to other college age women and teens about topics that relate. You might talk about fashion one week, but then you're talking about your choices in a partner the next, and then that folds into communication skills the next. So having, like, using television talk shows to get young folks talking, then you're creating this safe space. You're opening up an opportunity for people who may not feel like they have anybody they can talk to. They have these cute fly people in front of them they can talk to about it that have the correct info. And then they feel empowered to share that info with their other friends who may not want to go to a TV studio. They're like, no, that's not my thing, but they can share it. So that's just one example. And anybody really can do that. You can start a podcast like you have done to share the information, and get people talking about stuff that's rolling around in other people's heads. And they just need to validate the information, and feel like there's somebody else thinking like me, and there's a place I can go to get the details.
Thank you for answering that. And I'd also like to say, you are not old and crusty. You are not. You are gorgeous. Like what? Um,
I'm just saying, because the generation, folks like to pit different generations against each
yeah.
other for whatever
I
reason.
always say we need to bridge the gap. So you are not old and crusty. You are very much needed. You are very wise. And young girls like myself, we need to sit under wise women, women who went and fact checked the information, got their education, and who are thriving in a society that wants us to be, you know, not successful and with these different societal norms. So thank you, one, for being here. And I'm going to ask you one last question. Can you share some examples of other successful programs that you feel have been impactful programs or initiatives that have effectively addressed HIV prevention and treatment for young girls, and what you think made them very successful?
Yeah, sure. So a while ago, we worked with the curriculum called SILE. It's an acronym, SIHLE. The acronym was Sisters Informing, Healing, Living, and Empowering. This was a program that was written many, many years ago. So it's no longer offered, I think what it is, in the compendium for projects like with the CDC, like you can't really get it anymore because some of the information is outdated and it isn't fully inclusive. Like when it was written, it didn't really include transgender or other norms, or other conversations that are more of the norm now. But I felt that it was very successful because it really had great activities, um, to break down the seriousness of the conversation about STI and pregnancy prevention. When you start talking about gonorrhea and syphilis and things like that, like that's pretty heavy. It feels like school. And if you're a teenager, you want to tune out. You're like, oh my Lord, I feel like this is biology too. Oh,
Just
I'm
bored.
so it's boring. You looking like what time is lunch? But what they do is they'll give you other games and activities to build you up to that information. So when we give it to you, you're not all bored because you've just played this game. There was one activity in this program where you did like an investigation of the music you like. So the facilitator would ask you, what's your favorite song right now? What are the songs that are popular on the radio? And folks would say, I don't know, it would be Megan Thee Stallion now, but it was somebody else back then. They would mention certain things, and then we would like analyze the lyrics, and then we would just start to ask questions about, oh, okay, well, they talking about this. Do you know what this is? Like, have you seen that? Have you done
Right.
that? Do you understand what's happening in the song lyrics? So you bridge the gap between the music you're listening to and what's being banged in your ear with this very real thing.
Right.
Like, this is what's happening over here. Okay, if you're doing this, okay, what are some of the risks if you're not protected? You have these things over here. And then they bridge it into understanding communication and communication styles. Are you a passive communicator? Are you an aggressive communicator? Are you an assertive communicator?
Nice.
And understanding the difference and why everybody leans towards aggressive, thinking it's assertive, but it's not. It's
Right. Yeah.
aggressive.
There's a difference, people.
There's a huge difference between aggressive and assertive. And I think that program was great because it really was about sisterhood, building a young woman up. There were affirmations recited at the beginning of it. And it just felt like a nice place to be for a young girl for a couple of days. And then you got some information. So I think programs like that don't just hit you with facts and then leave you with a gift card. It's like, forming a bond, a place where people can go to learn and feel safe.
Thank you for that. That's awesome. And I hope that people take advantage of the resources that we have, right? And just the programs and initiatives that have come that are that no longer exist. There is still information surrounding them that we can pull from and make them more relatable to today's time, especially with wanting to bridge the generations to close that gap, you know. So thank you for that. Thank you for your perspective. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our listeners and viewers before we wrap up the conversation?
Yeah, I just want to encourage folks to learn as much as you can, and don't let it make you feel like you're awful for wanting to know things. It doesn't mean you want to do everything. Just because you want to learn about it doesn't mean you want to do it, but learn about it, and learn how to build your communicative muscle so that you don't end up in a situation you don't want to be in. If you can speak up and get out of it, whether that's a bad relationship, whether that's just somebody spewing bad information, learn how to speak up. Figure out who it is you can trust, and base that on what it is that they tell you. Is what they're telling you really a good idea? Is what they're telling you only based in a negative experience, or does it have like a balanced view? Um, and learn and know yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're going to spend the most time with you, nobody else.
Thank you for that advice. That last portion, know yourself, spend time with yourself. You right about that. Self-care is the best care. Self-care is the best care. So thank you for your wisdom, for your transparency, for your honesty to the questions. Um I really appreciate it. I'll say it for myself. I really appreciate it. I know my generation appreciates it. I'm Gen Z, and my
Okay.
sister, I would assume she's Alpha. I think Alpha is after Z.
Yeah, I
But
think so. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. But thank you because you are bridging the generations, whether you know it or not, because we have listeners of all ages who
Yeah.
needed to hear everything that you stated. So thank you for that. And to our listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning into this episode of our podcast. We hope you found it informative and engaging. And if you did, we encourage you to tune into our upcoming episodes that will be covering topics like the impact of PrEP in HIV prevention, health and wellness for Black transgender women, and Black women navigating life and the professional spaces. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us reach more listeners. Until the next time, thank you so much for listening in.